Hi, welcome to EXP. I'm Dan Keneally, a meditation teacher.
And I'm Chris Walton. I am also a meditation teacher.
We're talking today about recent experiences that we've had. Teachers. I stay connected with as many of my teachers as possible. So many benefits. Teachers, mentors, friends, they kind of roll into one when you stay connected. One of my teachers, a dear friend now, Mike Standish, I went to his in London at the weekend for a course, and it was one of those advanced Indian philosophy courses where he has a group of his meditation students or students who are interested in the philosophy of meditation, and he'll run a 3-day course, facilitating a course of lectures around the topic of Vedic and yogic philosophy. And to continue the journey of deepening your knowledge around a subject like meditation is a fascinating way of not only staying connected with your practice, but understanding it in a much more deeper level than just someone who meditates to manage stress every day. There's so many layers to each practice of meditation, but when you boil them down to the fundamentals, you can really get an understanding of where they're from, why they're still around, thousands of years later, and you can think about your own personal development in a much broader sense, which really marries up with the broader sense that you see yourself in the world as you begin to meditate. And it was a really wonderful experience to do that in a group setting with other people who are listening and talking and learning at the same time.
Yeah, I absolutely loved that. And what's coming up for me is how you could probably hear the same message in some format, but then you go to this when you're later down the line, you go in this advanced thing, and it's probably the same message, but you just understand it on other levels. It just unlocks, something just keeps unlocking. And the other thing that's coming up for me is we often talk about people using meditation as like a sticking plaster or like a tool. And I'm thinking how this is the other end of the spectrum. You're talking about how it affects the whole of your being and life. And I think people that are on probably the start of the journey often just see it as a tool. It's just something I'll use when I feel stressed or I need to sleep. And it's just this thing I can use. I'm just thinking how vastly different they are. One is just a small part of your life that you control and you're just going to use this tool. And the other one is, this is how I interact with everything, I don't know if that's resonating or,
It really is. I think one of the key takeaways was if you boil meditation practice down to its simplest forms, there's 2 reasons to meditate. One is to de-stress your body and regulate your nervous system and rid your body of stored stresses, deeply ingrained stresses. And the second is to shed your mistaken intellect. And that's it. That's what meditation does. It regulates your nervous system, de-stresses you, and it begins to rid you of that mistaken intellect so that you stop being ignorant of what we actually are as humans. And we can begin to master the art of living. And with fundamental philosophical principles that have been around for 5,000 years. From the Vedic traditions, we get yoga and Ayurveda, Kundalini, pranayama, meditation, all these amazing, Eastern techniques that are just getting more and more popular. There's been a whole resurgence in the West over the past 20, 25 years in those areas. And there's a resurgence for a reason. It's because they still fundamentally and principally work.
And what keeps coming into my mind is like how we see the world through our senses, like sight, feelings, sounds, and it's that interface. It's how we interface the world, and in the West we don't really look at that. we just look at the world. But yeah, tell me a bit more about what kind of things came up. And
so in terms of senses that you mentioned, so when you think about the terms that we see splashed all over the kind of the social medias and online, higher states of consciousness, or spiritual awakening, or conscious beings. For conscious, you can read the word awareness. So for the less spiritual, if you say, rather than raising your consciousness, would you like to become more self-aware? They kind of mean the same thing. So it's pitching the language at certain groups to make them understand what are fundamentally the same subjects. In terms of raising consciousness, which is what meditation is often can help people achieve, it's exactly what you just said. It's sensory perception and awareness. It's the fine level of feeling that you begin to develop in your touch, in your sight, in your taste, in your hearing. Your sixth sense is almost the five senses molded into one that are accentuated. And that's what's meant by kind of raising consciousness levels individually, is, are you becoming more aware? Your event horizon of things that you are aware of and can influence begins to grow. Are you aware of what's going on around you? Are you feeling more intuitive? Get out of your head and into your body. Really interesting to think about spiritual terminology and concepts, but on a really practical level, that if you sit and take some time, you can put those into practice in normal everyday situations, which brings it to life, which is the whole point.
It's the whole point, and you have to feel it, because it's not this intellectual knowledge, it's a knowing that you find through experience. And I'm just wondering if you, for myself, there had to be a softening of my, I suppose, ego, but my image of myself. And so, like, when I first started on the journey, I might learn these concepts. I think as you get more experience doing more advanced stuff, would you say there's like a feeling of trust, and maybe there is a loosening of your image of yourself to then allow these kind of to now allow this knowledge of the interaction with the world and everything?
I think so, yeah. I think there's a certain dissolution of your ego that occurs at some point. And I don't think it's something that you give up or relinquish intentionally. I think it's done for you. You almost look back and think, well, I'm completely different. And it's not I planned to be different, or I planned to think differently. I've just evolved in the same way that everything else in nature is evolving. This idea that change is inevitable, because everything is governed by the laws of nature. And change can happen in two ways. It can either progress or it can deteriorate, and that's just evolution. So it progresses by being creative, and it deteriorates or dissolves through stagnation and no longer being relevant. So can you put creativity into your life in order to advance your own evolution? And how do you do that? And then once you kind of get those basics of understanding that, well, of course that makes perfect sense, then you look for creative opportunities. Meditation can be seen as a really creative thing that you can do to aid your own evolution. Stopping drinking alcohol is a really creative thing that you can do to aid your own evolution. Ridding yourself of possessions that you don't really need, it can be seen as a really creative. So all these things that you can do in your life in terms of your habits, behaviors, friendships, relationships, rituals, you can begin to make creative decisions that meet the need of the time to stop stagnation and move yourself forwards. And if you do that, then you can only evolve.
I love that, because it's kind of saying, when you think of stop drinking, it's stop drinking. Now you're actually saying start creating, or start to. It's kind of like a get out your own way, isn't it? It's kind of like get out of nature's way, which is evolving and growing. But because we're of nature, getting out of nature's way, get out of your own way. I definitely feel that.
It's massively creative, because if you're not drinking, what are you doing instead? Well, I'm getting up earlier in the morning on a weekend, and I'm doing something that's something I want to do, whether it's working on a business or going to meet somebody or creating opportunity. Even spending time in nature, seeing friends and family, there are days in the past where that wouldn't have happened because I would have been drinking the night before. Instead of drinking, I've a lot more clarity, I have a lot more focus, I have less procrastination. Meditation helps with that, but so does not drinking. So the more of these good habits that you can do to live, in Vedic terms, what's a sattvic lifestyle, the more that you can live that sattvic lifestyle, can really push you forward. And only when you look back can you see the journey that you've been on. And sometimes you go, wow, what a difference a year or two makes. To live it's about being happy. It's about being happy.
And that aliveness. And I think a lot of the time we might put the energy into drinking or something as a thinking that's aliveness, but it doesn't have to be. It could be the getting up and doing all the stuff. Just be alive rather than avoiding kind of feeling kinds of things. Just go and do life,
Yeah, and it's great to connect with your teacher again, and keeping that connection fresh, because it really relights that fire inside of you we're teachers, we've had teachers, and knowing that there's a chain of people just sharing knowledge, and then in a few years' time there'll be other people that come along that are sharing the knowledge that we've given, and then sharing the knowledge, and that's how it's been for thousands of years. So to be part of that chain of just sharing good information, and inspiring and being inspired, it just makes you feel that yes, this is the creative path that I'm pleased I'm on.